A few months after his parents' divorce, little Johnny walked past his mom's room and saw her lying on the bed, rubbing her arms and sighing, "I need a man. I need a man." He noticed her doing this a few more times over the next few weeks. One day, he came home from school and peeked into her room. This time, there was a man on top of her. Johnny ran straight to his own room, jumped onto his bed, threw his hands in the air, and started shouting, "I need a bike! I need a bike!" 1. A man walks into a bar with a paper bag in his hand. He sits down and places the bag on the counter. The bartender walks up and asks, "What's in the bag?" The man reaches into the bag and pulls out a little man about 12 inches in height and sets him on the counter. He reaches back into the bag and pulls out a small piano, setting it on the counter as well. He reaches back into the bag again and pulls out a tiny piano bench. The little man sits at the piano and starts playing a beautiful piece by Mozart. "Where on earth did you get that?" asks the surprised bartender. The man responds by reaching into the paper bag once more. This time, he pulls out a magic lamp. He hands it to the bartender and says, "Here, rub it." So the bartender rubs the lamp, and suddenly there's a gust of smoke and a beautiful genie is standing before him. "I will grant you one wish, but just one." The bartender gets really excited and without hesitation says, "I want $1 million." A few moments later, a duck walks into the bar. Then another duck and another. Pretty soon, the entire bar is filled with ducks, and they keep coming. The bartender turns to the man and says, "You know, I think your genie is a little deaf. I asked for $1 million, not 1,000,000 ducks." The man replies, "Do you really think I asked for a 12-inch pianist?" 2. A bloke starts his new job at the zoo and is given 3 tasks. First, he's asked to tidy up the exotic fish pool, which is overrun with weeds. While he's working, a huge fish leaps out and startles him. In his panic, he accidentally knocks the fish into a nearby wheelbarrow. Not wanting to waste it, he decides to take it to the lions, thinking, "Lions will eat anything." Next, he moves on to clean the chimp enclosure. The cheeky chimps are playful and start throwing coconuts at him. While dodging the flying coconuts, he accidentally knocks them over into the same wheelbarrow. Again, he thinks, "Well, the lions won't mind," and wheels them over to the lion enclosure. Finally, he's asked to collect honey from the South American beehives. As he carefully gathers the honey, the buzzing bees surround him. He accidentally tips the honeycomb into the wheelbarrow along with the bees. Thinking of the lions once more, he heads to their area and says, "Here's something sweet for dessert." Later that day, a new lion arrives at the zoo. Curious, he asks another lion, "So, what's the food like around here?" The lion grins and says, "Ooh, it's fantastic. Today we had fish and chimps with mushy bees." Doctor and a lawyer in 2 cars collided on a country road. The lawyer, seeing that the doctor was a little shaken up, helped him from the car and offered him a drink from his hip flask. The doctor accepted and handed the flask back to the lawyer, who closed it and put it away. "Aren't you going to have a drink yourself?" asked the doctor. "Sure, after the police leave," replied the attorney. 4. I recently picked a new primary care doctor. After 2 visits and a bunch of lab tests, he looked at me and said, "You're doing fairly well for your age." A little concerned, I couldn't help but ask, "Doc, do you think I'll make it to 80? He paused and asked, "Well, do you smoke or drink?" "Oh no, never," I replied. "Do you eat ribeye steaks or barbecue?" "Nope. I have heard red meat isn't healthy." "Do you spend time outdoors? Golf, sailing, rock climbing?" "No, I prefer to stay inside." Do you gamble, drive fast cars, or, fool around? Absolutely not. The doctor stared at me for a moment, then said, Then why do you care if you live to be 80? 5. A man comes home from a game of golf to be greeted by his young son. Daddy, Daddy, cried the boy excitedly, yes? Did you win? Well, son, replied the man, in golf it doesn't matter so much if you win. But I tell you one thing, I got to hit the ball more times than anyone else. 6. 2 guys are working at a sawmill when, wham! One of them gets too close to the blade and chops off his arm. His buddy grabs the severed limb, shoves it in a plastic bag, and rushes him to the hospital. The next day, he visits his friend and finds him casually playing tennis. Incredible, he says. Medical science is amazing. A month later, same sawmill, same 2 guys. Wham! This time, the poor guy's leg gets lopped off. Once again, his buddy scoops it up, bags it, and hauls him to the hospital. The next day, he stops by to check in and finds his pal outside playing football. Incredible, he says. Medical science is amazing. Another month goes by, and wouldn't you know it, wham! This time, the guy bends too close, and off comes his head. His buddy sighs, shoves it in a plastic bag, and rushes to the hospital one more time. The next day, he arrives to visit his friend, but he's nowhere to be found. He spots the doctor and asks, Hey doc, where's my friend? I brought him in yesterday. The doctor shakes his head. Oh yeah, some idiot put his head in a plastic bag and he suffocated. 7. A petrol station owner in Ireland was struggling with sales, so he decided to get creative. He put up a big, bold sign outside. Free fun with owner's wife fill-up. Paddy, always up for a good deal, pulled in, filled his tank to the brim, and marched up to the owner. All right, I'm all filled up. How do I claim the offer? The owner smiled. Simple, mate. Just pick a number between 1 and 10. If you guess it right, you win. Paddy thought for a moment. All right then, 8. The owner sighed and shook his head. Oof, close. It was 7. Maybe next time. Paddy grumbled but drove off. A week later, he came back, this time with his buddy John. They both filled up, and Paddy, determined to win, walked up again. Okay, let's try this again. The number is 2. The owner grinned. Ah, unlucky. It was 3 this time. So close, but no prize today. As they drove away, John leaned over and whispered, Paddy, I think this whole thing is a scam. He's never going to give out the reward. Paddy smirked and shrugged. Oh, it's real, all right. My wife won twice last week. An 80-year-old man goes to a doctor for a checkup. The doctor tells him, You're in terrific shape. There's nothing wrong with you. Why, you might live forever. By the way, how old was your father when he died? The 80-year-old responded, Did I say he was dead? The doctor couldn't believe it. So he said, Well, how old was your grandfather when he died? The 80-year-old responded again, Did I say he was dead? The doctor was astonished. He said, You mean to tell me you are 80 years old and both your father and your grandfather are both alive? Not only that, said the patient, my grandfather is 126 years old, and next week he is getting married for the first time. The doctor said, After 126 years of being a bachelor, why on earth did your grandfather want to get married? His patient looked up at the doctor and said, Did I say he wanted to? 9. A woman, cranky because her husband was late coming home again, decided to leave a note, saying, I've had enough and have left you. Don't bother coming after me." Then she hid under the bed to see his reaction. After a short while, the husband comes home, and she could hear him in the kitchen before he comes into the bedroom. She could see him walk towards the dresser and pick up the note. After a few minutes, he wrote something on it before picking up the phone and calling someone. "She's finally gone. Yeah, I know, about time. I'm coming to see you. Put on that French nightie. I love you. Can't wait to see you. We'll do all the naughty things you like." He hung up, grabbed his keys and left. She heard the car drive off as she came out from under the bed, seething with rage, and with tears in her eyes, she grabbed the note to see what he wrote. The note said, "I can see your feet. We're out of the bread. Be back in 5 minutes. 10. A mother and her young daughter were walking through New York City when the mother tried to hail a cab. As they waited, the little girl noticed a group of women dressed in flashy clothes, loitering on a street corner. Finally, the mother got a cab and they climbed in. The curious little girl turned to her mother and asked, "Mommy, what are those ladies doing over there?" The mother, trying to dodge the question, replied, "Oh, those ladies are just waiting for their husbands to come pick them up on their way home from work." The cab driver, overhearing the exchange, turned around and said, "Come on, lady, tell your daughter the truth. They're hookers." There was a brief pause of awkward silence. Then the little girl, with a confused look, asked, "Mommy, do the hooker ladies have children?" The mother, without missing a beat, replied, "Of course, dear. Where do you think cabbies come from?" 11. A redneck is sitting at the local bar, silently nursing a beer. Suddenly, a big burly man walks in and slaps the redneck so hard that he falls off the stool. "That was a karate chop from Korea," says the big man proudly. The redneck sighs, gets up and brushes the dust off his clothes, sits down on the stool and continues to drink his beer. Suddenly, he gets hit so hard that he flies into the wall. "That was a kung fu chop from China," chuckles the big man. The redneck has had enough. He gets up, brushes off the dust and calmly leaves the pub. After about an hour, he returns, walks up behind the big guy who is now sitting at the bar, and whacks him so hard behind his ear that he knocks him out. The redneck looks at the bartender and says, "When he wakes up, why don't you tell him that was a shovel from the Walmart store down the road?" 12. 3 elderly sisters, aged 82, 84, and 86, lived together. One night, the 86-year-old drew a bath. She put her foot in and then paused. After a few moments, she yelled down the stairs. "Was I getting in or out of the bath?" The 84-year-old yelled back. "I don't know. I'll come up and see," she said. She started walking up the stairs and paused. "Was I going up the stairs or down?" Finally, the 82-year-old, sitting at the kitchen table having tea, shook her head. "I sure hope I never get that forgetful," she said. She knocked on wood for good measure and then yelled, "I'll come up and help both of you as soon as I see who's at the door." Jack's mother rushed into the bedroom when she heard him scream. There, she found his 2-year-old sister yanking at his hair. Gently, she pried her little fingers loose and comforted Jack, saying, There, sweetie, she didn't mean to hurt you. She doesn't know that pulling hair is painful." Just as she left the room, the baby's scream pierced the air. Startled, she quickly ran back in. "What happened?" she asked, concern in her voice. Jack, rubbing his own head, looked up and said with a grin, "She knows now?" 14. Without fail, George went for his annual checkup every year. He prided himself on staying fit and healthy by going on walks in the neighbourhood, though age had taken its toll on his eyesight. After his checkup, George sat and chattered with his doctor, proudly telling Dr. Stevens about his latest discovery. "Doc, I'm blessed," he said. "God knows my eyesight is going, so he puts on the light when I pee and turns it off when I'm done." The doctor chuckled, but a nagging curiosity led him to call George's wife later that day. "Maria," he said, "your husband's test results are just fine, but he said something strange. He claims that God turns the lights on and off for him when he uses the bathroom at night." George's wife laughed out loud. "That old fool! He's been peeing in the refrigerator again. I thought it was the dog." 15. Joe and Wanda lived in a cozy city apartment, and they found themselves in a bit of a bind one lazy Sunday afternoon. They wanted a little privacy, but their 10-year-old son was home, and the walls in their apartment were thin. After a bit of brainstorming, they came up with a plan. They decided to send their son out to the balcony with the mission of being their spy for the afternoon. His job? To report on all the exciting happenings in the neighbourhood. They figured it would keep him occupied for a bit and maybe even amuse him. Their son didn't hesitate, excited to be the neighbourhood reporter. "There's a dog barking over at the Johnsons' house," he called out, looking down at the street. "Someone's washing their car," he added with a grin. After a few moments of silence, he piped up again. "The Millers are putting up a new fence," he observed. "Oh, and the Pattersons just brought home a pizza." Wanda and Joe exchanged a satisfied look as they began to carry out their plan. Then came a pause, followed by a very loud announcement. "Mom, Dad, you won't believe this. The Smiths' kid is standing on the balcony with binoculars." Joe froze. "What? How do you know that?" The boy replied matter-of-factly. "Because he's watching us." 16. An attorney arrived home late after a very tough day trying to get a stay of execution. His last-minute plea for clemency to the governor had failed, and he was feeling worn out and depressed. As soon as he walked through the door at home, his wife started on him about, "What time of night to be getting home is this? Where have you been? Dinner is cold and I'm not reheating it." And on and on and on. Too shattered to play his usual role in this familiar ritual, he poured himself a shot of whiskey and headed off for a long hot soak in the bathtub, pursued by the predictable sarcastic remarks as he dragged himself up the stairs. While he was in the bath, the phone rang. The wife answered and was told that her husband's client, James Wright, had been granted a stay of execution after all. Wright would not be hanged tonight. Finally realizing what a terrible day he must have had, she decided to go upstairs and give him the good news. As she opened the bathroom door, she was greeted by the sight of her husband, bent over drying his legs and feet. "They're not hanging right tonight," she said. He whirled around and screamed, "For the love of woman, don't you ever stop!" A newlywed couple was settling into their honeymoon suite when the groom, a big burly guy, tossed his pants to his bride and smirked. "Here, put these on." She slipped them on, but the waistband was so big it could fit two of her. "I can't wear your pants," she laughed. "Exactly," he said, puffing out his chest. "And don't you forget it. I'm the one who wears the pants in this family." Without missing a beat, she picked up her lacy tossed them at him. "All right, big guy, your turn." He tried, but they barely made it past his knees. Frustrated, he huffed, "I can't get into these." She crossed her arms and grinned. "Exactly. And that's how it's going to stay until your attitude changes. 17. At an airline ticket counter, all of the ticket agents were doing their best to politely process each passenger as quickly as they could. A man at the end of the passenger line was impatient and frustrated at having to wait so long in the slow-moving line. He finally decided to march up to the counter to demand that he be given his boarding pass. The ticket agent turned and said, "Sir, as you can see, there are many passengers ahead of you. We are doing our best to process the passengers as fast as we can. I'm afraid you'll have to get back in line." Outraged and red in the face, the man yelled at the ticket agent, "Do you know who I am?" The ticket agent turned, picked up the public address system microphone, and said calmly, "There is a man at the ticket counter who does not know who he is. Anyone who may be able to identify this man is asked to please step forward and identify him, thank you." 18. A teacher asks her class to use the word contagious in a sentence. Sally, the class genius, raises her hand and says, "Last year I got the mumps and my mom said it was contagious." "Very good," says the teacher. "Would anyone else like to try?" Little Johnny raises his hand and stands to give his answer. "Our mean next-door neighbor was painting her house by hand, and my dad said it would take the contagious." 19. 3 mischievous grandmas were sitting on a bench outside of their nursing home, laughing their heads off like giggling girls. Now, ladies," a nurse said, walking past them. "You need to get your sunshine time before tea, and behave." Her words only set them off again. Soon they spotted an old man walking by, and decided to have a bit of fun with him. "We bet we can tell exactly how old you are," one of the grandmas yelled out at him. The old man scoffed. "There's no way that you can guess it, you 3 old fools." "Sure we can," another grandma insisted. "Just drop your pants and we can tell your exact age." "What?" he exclaimed. Embarrassed but intrigued, the old man dropped his pants, the sunlight shining on his bottom. The grandmas stared and whispered among themselves, and then said in unison, "You're 91 years old." "How in the world did you guess?" the old man asked, shocked. The grandmas snickered and replied, "Because we were at your birthday party yesterday," one grandma said, as the other 2 collapsed into giggles again. 3 men died in a car accident and arrived at the pearly gates, where they were greeted by Jesus himself. The Lord said, "I will ask each of you a simple question. If you tell the truth, I will welcome you into heaven. But if you lie, waits." Turning to the first man, the Lord asked, "How many times did you cheat on your wife?" The man stood tall and replied, "Lord, I was a faithful husband. I never cheated." "Very good," the Lord said. "For your loyalty, you shall have a grand mansion and a limousine for transportation." Then the Lord asked the second man, "And how about you?" The second man hesitated before admitting, "Lord, I cheated on my wife twice." The Lord nodded. "You may enter, but for your unfaithfulness, you will receive a 4-bedroom house and a BMW. Finally, the Lord turned to the third man. "And you?" The man sighed and said, "Lord, I cheated about 8 times." The Lord frowned slightly, but said, "I will still allow you in, but you will get a 1-room apartment and a Yugo for transportation." A few hours later, the second and third men found the first man sobbing. "Why are you crying?" they asked. "You got the mansion and the limo." Through his tears, the first man choked out, "I just saw my wife, and she was riding a skateboard. 21. In the supermarket, a woman watched a grandfather and his badly behaved grandson with growing admiration. The child screamed for sweets and biscuits, yet the granddad remained calm. "Easy, William, we won't be long." "Easy, boy," he said soothingly. At the checkout, the chaos continued. The little terror of a child threw items out of the trolley, but the granddad's composure never wavered. "William, William, relax, buddy. Don't get upset. Don't get upset. We'll be home in 5 minutes. Stay cool, William. Keep your cool, William." Outside, the woman approached the grandfather. "I know it's none of my business, but you were amazing in there. William is very lucky to have you as his granddad." The old man smiled widely, and then chuckled. "Thanks, but I am William. This little guy's name is Kevin." 22. Little Johnny was always the target of the neighborhood boys' teasing. Their favorite trick was to offer him a choice between a nickel and a dime. Johnny always took the nickel, making them laugh at how dumb he was. One day, after watching this happen again, a kind neighbor pulled Johnny aside. "Johnny, don't you know a dime is worth more than a nickel, even though the nickel is bigger?" Johnny flashed a mischievous grin. "Of course, I know that. But if I took the dime, they'd stop playing the game. And so far, I've made 20 bucks. 23. A mother was worried about her kindergarten son, Danny, walking to school alone. He didn't want her to come with him, insisting he could handle it on his own. Wanting to give him independence while keeping him safe, she confided in her neighbor. The neighbor, who was often up early with her toddler, had a suggestion. "I'll follow Danny to school, but I'll stay far enough back so he won't notice. It'll be a nice way for me to get some exercise too," the neighbor offered. Relieved, the mother agreed. The next morning, the neighbor and her little girl began their subtle escort, trailing Danny as he walked with his friend. They quietly followed for the entire week, keeping their distance as the boys laughed, chatted, and kicked stones along the way. By Friday, Danny's friend finally noticed the woman following them. "Hey, Danny," he whispered, glancing over his shoulder. "Have you seen that lady who's been behind us all week? Do you know her?" Danny nodded casually. "Yeah, I know her." The friend, curious, asked, "Well, who is she?" "That's Grace Goodkind," Danny replied with a shrug. "And her daughter, Faith." "Grace Goodkind? Who's that, and why is she following us?" Danny grinned. "Every night, my mom makes me say the 23rd Psalm with my prayers because she worries about me so much. It says, 'Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life.' So I guess I'll just have to get used to it."
A priest and a nun find themselves stranded in a blizzard and take refuge in a remote, deserted cabin. Inside, they discover a bed, a sleeping bag, and a pile of blankets. The priest, ever the gentleman, offers the bed to the nun and takes the sleeping bag for himself. As they prepare for sleep, the nun shivers and calls out, "Father, Father, I'm cold." The priest gets up, adds another blanket over her, and asks, "Is that better, sister?" She nods and replies, "Yes, Father, much better." Just as the priest starts to drift off to sleep, she calls again, "Father, I'm still cold." He rises once more and adds another blanket, ensuring she's snug. "Is that better, sister?" he asks. "Oh yes, Father, that's much better," she responds. The priest settles back into his sleeping bag, but barely begins to doze when he hears, "Father, Father, I'm still so cold." After a long pause, the priest thinks for a moment and finally says, "Sister, we are alone here in the middle of a blizzard, and no one but you, me, and the Lord will ever know what happens tonight. How about, just for tonight, we pretend we're married?" The nun considers this, and after a brief silence, she cautiously agrees, "Okay, Father, just for tonight, we will pretend we're married." The priest then replies, "Well, in that case, get your own damned blanket," and rolls over to sleep. A man walks into a cozy diner on a chilly evening, craving something warm and hearty. He glances at the menu, but his decision is instant. "I'll have a bowl of chili," he tells the waitress with a smile. The waitress, with an apologetic shrug, replies, "I'm sorry, hon, but the guy next to you just got the last bowl." The man looks over at the other diner, who seems to be done with his meal. Strangely, the bowl of chili in front of him remains untouched. Unable to resist his craving, the man asks, "Hey, are you going to eat that chili?" The other diner shakes his head, waving it off. "Nope. Go ahead." Gratefully, the man slides the bowl over and digs in. The chili is warm, flavorful, and exactly what he needed. Spoonful after spoonful, he savors every bite, until he gets about halfway through. Then, his spoon hits something solid. Curious, he peers into the bowl. His stomach churns as he sees a dead mouse nestled among the chili. The man immediately retches, spewing the chili he had just enjoyed back into the bowl. As he sits there, wiping his mouth in horror, the other diner chuckles and says, "Yeah, that's about as far as I got too."